Aloha, and welcome to Koa Studio. So in this video, I'm going to be making one of my largest pieces yet. This is going to be based off of the Mayan macuahuitl, and it's using a design from this artist here. Now he draws large pieces. They are based off of traditional designs, but they are definitely not traditional pieces. But I love the design that he had, where it had the obsidian blades that were kind of a square shape, and then they ended with like a triangle shape. And instead of the triangles, I'm going to be using these Megalodon teeth, which I'm super excited for. And those are massive Megalodons. I'm sure there are larger that are out there, but they are the largest Megalodon teeth that I've had the chance to work with. The reason why I wanted to use those is I wanted this piece to be more of a combination style piece that would almost be like a monster hunter weapon, which I thought would be super cool just because it's kind of a cool game. So it's kind of a mix between my Hawaiian styles, the Mayan macuahuitl. It's going to have obsidian blades, and then the Megalodon teeth, reminiscent of the Monster Hunter games and weapons that you would see there. Now this is a large piece, definitely one of the largest I've ever made. Just absolutely gigantic, which was a problem in and of itself. The first problem is I didn't have a piece of koa wood that was going to be large enough, and so I'm needing to join a small section of koa to that original piece that I had. And part of the problem that I was worried about is those Megalodon teeth, the root of the teeth, the base of the teeth is really thick, and so it's difficult to inset that into a piece of koa, into any type of wood, because you need a really thick piece of wood. And so the piece that I'm joining onto here using a tongue and groove join, I'm going to be doing so with a larger piece than what the rest of this is. So that way I don't have to remove that much material from the rest of the piece. I just have to remove some excess material here, but it gives me plenty of material to inset those large Megalodons into there. I did make a mistake though. Oh, I made tons of mistakes. But one of the mistakes that I made was I tried to line this up with that center line. You can see I wasn't quite dead on. I ended up cutting that joint a little bit offset. So I was going to redraw the center line, and I didn't. What I did was I just drew the center line and connected it to the existing center line. By not redrawing that center line, my entire sketch ended up being offset from the joint, which became a big problem for me later that I had to address. As of this point in time, I hadn't realized about that problem yet. I was too worried about making sure my piece was long enough, that the spacing was going to be good, because some of those obsidian blades are just massive. The artist that chipped those for me did an absolutely amazing job. So they have a cutting edge, they have an edge that will sit into the wood, and so I'm just lining everything out, making sure everything is going to have good spacing, is going to fit well. I didn't even realize that I had screwed up already. And I wouldn't realize until after I cut it out, which meant it was too late as of that point in time. Now I have two options when I realized I had done that. Option one is I just start on a whole new piece of koa wood. Option two is I try to figure out a different solution. And that kind of became a theme throughout this whole project. I ended up having a lot of small errors that I had to overcome, otherwise I would potentially have to scrap the project. It was a really expensive project. All of the materials put together was well over $1,000, so it's not necessarily something that I could just lose. If I ruin it to the extent that I would need to start all over again, it would just be done. I wouldn't be able to continue with it. But luckily I was able to overcome those, which you saw in the first 5 seconds of the video. So this is the start of that journey, and I'm just going to be working on cutting in the grooves for the teeth. I am putting in a small peg. Well, it's not a small peg, it's like a 3/4 inch peg, but I'm putting a peg on that one side that had the thinner wall just to make sure that stays nice and strong. But I'm going to be cutting in the grooves for the teeth and then start shaping, and then from there I can start working on actually shaping the entire piece. I just didn't want to shape it first. I wanted to put center lines all around the piece first, so I didn't make the same mistake in the beginning in the end. What I'm doing here is these are fossils. These are natural materials. They have fissures, they have holes, they have gaps. And so I'm filling most, if not all of them, up with CA glue, and the idea there is just to help hold them together so that they don't fracture on me and I can seat them into the piece successfully. Now you can see the lines that I have drawn along the outer edges. What's going to happen there is I'm going to have a taper. So I have a taper that's going to be on both sides, so the edges will taper down, and then I'm actually going to have like a hollow grind that's going to be down the center of the piece. But as I was shaping, this was sticking out just more and more, and it was just driving me insane. Originally I thought maybe I can get away with it, maybe it won't be as noticeable, but it is just unbearably noticeable. And so I knew if I was going to fix it, I would need to tackle that problem earlier rather than later. And so what I decided to do, and I actually slept on it for probably a good day and a half, but what I decided to do was put an overlay, or rather an inlay that will hide that joint and make it look like it's jointed using a different method. And that way I can have the exact same amount of distance on both sides of the piece, and at the same time I think give it actually better character. So I think it's going to look better even if I had centered the joint, because this makes everything just look, or hopefully everything look a little bit more intentional. Maybe not, maybe it'll look horrible. You can tell me at the end what you think. As you saw in the clip, I used my Dremel to hand router out or hog out the majority of the material, and then I'm using my chisel set here to clean up those edges and get it a nice clean crisp line so that when I go to put in the inlay it'll be really clean, it won't have too many exposed edges, and it'll look nice there. And so that's kind of the plan. I have to do this on both sides, and that will hopefully hide and make that joint just look a lot better. Now, another design feature that I didn't really like too much was actually that fuller, that hollowed out section in the middle. I didn't like the way that that was kind of looking, even the sketched out section where I have it drawn there. I did put it in that way, but the entire time I was shaping, it just wasn't... I didn't like the way that it looked. I didn't like the way that it flowed. It didn't seem like it matched the piece, and so I was constantly thinking about what I was going to do there. But that was kind of just part of the challenge on this large of a piece, was really figuring out how I wanted all of the different design and influences to mix together into one combined piece. But I really didn't have time to work on that just yet. I had gotten the edges shaped down as far as I wanted to before I could start sanding. I now wanted to cut in the groove for the obsidian blades so that I could continue to shape down while keeping it center on those blades and not worrying about removing too much material, because the blades are pretty thick, and if I remove too much, I won't have enough to inset them into the koa wood. Now, one thing that you'll notice here is I've got that piece of wood. It's acting as kind of a guide to help keep not only the depth in line along with all of the blades, but I want them to be mostly parallel along the edge of the koa wood. So the overall piece itself, it widens as it gets towards the end, and I want the blades to kind of follow along that widening edge and have a nice parallel to it. That way everything will mesh together and it'll look good, and so I was just using that piece of wood there to give me a good spacing as to how deep I needed to go. And the blades aren't perfectly dimensioned, and so some of them are deeper than others, some of them are deeper on one side than the other, so that helped me make sure that I could cut them in and get a nice clean edge. And then I cut in the one side, and I'm just going to be mirroring that on the other side. But it's a little bit of a challenge to get that to mirror, and so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the first one at the top matches, and then top to bottom it'll match, then I'll make the bottom one match, and then the rest of them will kind of just fall into place. And so that'll make it a lot easier for me to keep track of those. The worst thing that can happen is they could be offset from one another by just a little bit. It would be very noticeable by the eye if they were offset, if one was higher than the other going down, and so I want to be very careful in making sure that that doesn't happen. You're probably wondering what I'm using this for. So this was just an enormous amount of material to hog out of the center, which I've never really had to do before. And so I was trying to find just all the different ways that I could do that might speed up that process. And this ended up being kind of a handy tool to do that. It's just a small handhold cutter. It didn't work perfect. I still had a lot of cleanup I had to do with a mix between my chisels and my Dremel, but it did help speed up quite a bit of getting the majority of that center hogged out. And then I was able to go ahead and start shaping again. One problem though that kind of arose as I was hogging out that center section though was I ended up cutting too deep into one of the inlays. So I had purposefully made those inlays pretty thick, and I did that knowing that I was going to be cutting out a fuller. But you can see here kind of that weird green color. That's glue, where there was a separation between the wood and the glue up. And on this side it was perfect, but on the flip side I had cut past that inlay. And at this point I kind of freaked out a little bit. I was super worried because I didn't know what to do about that. Luckily I had a spare inlay, so when I had cut the inlays originally, they were from a pretty thick piece of koa, and so I kind of cut them in half, a little bit, not quite in half but almost, and then those half chunks were what became the inlays. So I had a piece left over. The other half got broke. I damaged it on accident. I still had this one left over, which meant it was the perfect dimension, the same size as the rest. And because it was the exact same size, what I was able to do is just cut the portion of it that I needed and then recut in a new inset onto the piece. And that actually worked perfectly. I got really lucky with that. That could have been just a horrible error, but lucky enough I was able to just cut in a brand new inlay using that leftover piece and get it fit the piece. I had to make sure it was really tight, really clean. That way you wouldn't tell the difference between the old and the new on the transition. An idea I had while I was working on shaping this was to actually burn this lower section. And so right here I'm just doing a little bit of a test segment to see how I like that it looks. Because I'm burning it, I can always come back and when I go to sand it down some more and remove. But I wanted to see how I would like that darker look. Obviously I could paint it as well, but I thought I've burnt a piece in the past and I really liked that dark look that it gave, especially after you do a light sand over top of it. And so I was doing a little bit of testing here and I actually really liked how it looked. And so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to burn this center segment down and it's going to taper off as it moves up. And then from here I was a little bit unsure exactly what I wanted it to taper into, but I did want some type of Niho pattern, triangle pattern that would be on it. That was just going to be a potential design configuration that I was going to be using for this piece. And so far on that test, I really liked it. For the Niho pattern, I'm going to be using white, gold, mother of pearl inlays, and I'm going to be shaping them to be triangles. So Niho is a shark, is a tooth, so the Niho pattern is going to be triangles. Triangles are the shape of tooth, and it's going to be a row of 5 on each side. Now, I wasn't quite sure exactly where I wanted to position it, but I did know that I wanted the burn aesthetic to taper into the Niho mano pattern, into the triangle pattern. And so what I decided to do is I decided to go ahead and burn in that first pattern. And so that's what I'm doing here. Is I've got this is a small torch, but it allows me a little bit more control over where I'm burning. And I'm gonna go ahead and start burning in that pattern. And I kind of wanted the pattern to look a little bit like a flame, so it looked like an actual fire was working its way up the piece. And so it's a lot darker down at the bottom. It kind of tapers in and out in different segments, and then slowly gets lighter as it goes up. And then the first couple of shark teeth, or rather the Niho pattern teeth, that I'm making right now, are going to inlay into those sections of burned wood. And hopefully that looks good. If you don't like it, let me know in the comments below. As I was cutting in the Niho mano pattern, I had an idea as to what I would do with this transition. And if you remember, I said I didn't really like the look of the transition before. I had that curved line that goes from the shoulder to the top. And so the idea that I had is I would have the tapered section on the sides of the macuahuitl on the blade come out to the point at the top, and that inside would taper up towards the ridge, and I would do some type of patternation on the inside. And that's what I'm doing on this block here. I was just testing all different kinds of patternation, and I finally landed on one that I liked, which was using this gouge. And then I would use that to have a contoured section of koa that would do the same thing as the fire or the burn section, where it would be a lot more thicker towards the end and then taper down as it gets towards the triangle pattern. And so I went ahead and got it prepped and ready to start cutting in those grooves. And I actually can start working on it right away, just because as of this point in time I was largely finished. The funny thing is I did a couple test gouges, even though I'd already tested on that small piece in the back there, and those test ones looked horrible. And so I was super nervous, but then I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna send it. I'm just gonna just go for it. I'm not making them super deep, so worst case scenario, I can sand it down and I should be okay. There should be still plenty of material left here at the top, and I won't risk compromising the strength of the piece where the teeth are gonna inset. And so I just went for it, and it actually started looking awesome. I was super excited the way that it was looking. I love the way that it tapers down. I love the way the side taper, where the blades get inset, kind of meet up with it. It just looked awesome. So super excited about that. Let me know what you think in the comments below, if you think it looks horrible or if you like it as much as I do. is the finished piece. I love how this piece came out. This is, I say this all the time. This might be my favorite piece. Every other piece I make, I say is my favorite piece, which is maybe a good thing. But man, this is awesome. It has so many different techniques that I have never tried before. So I've never done like the contoured design at the top. I haven't used obsidian blades before. The piece is massive. It weighs a lot more than I was expecting. I did a lot of weight reduction with those grooves, but I didn't quite expect the obsidian and the teeth fossils to weigh as much as they did. I mean, I can physically feel how much they weigh, but it's hard to tell that weight until it's in your hand and on the piece. But I love the different colors, the mother of pearl, the way that it goes from that burnt section up into the contoured section. This piece is definitely one of my favorites, and I had to test it. Now I am buffering my strength a little bit in testing this piece out, but I just whacked at it quite a few times, checked out how that damage was. It was a ton of fun. Well, let me know in the comments below what you think about this piece, if you like it, if you don't like it, if you wish I had done something a little different. I highly enjoyed it. This is by far the closest piece I've ever made to like a monster hunter weapon, mixed with the ancient Mayan macuahuitl greatsword. Just a combination piece that I'm in love with. Well, mahalo nui, everyone that watches. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Leave me comments below. I have some awesome projects coming up that I'm super excited for, and I'll see you in the next video. Aloha.